Hello and welcome to the Feel Freaking Amazing podcast. I'm Wendy Trubo. Obviously, Ed is not here today. We are solo recording and we have a great guest. We're talking to Chris Rhodes. Dr. Chris Rhodes is a nutritional biochemist. He has practical experience in nutrition, biohacking, healthfully aging, and fasting. He dedicated 8 years of research to unraveling the mysteries behind intermittent fasting and his incredible ability to optimize health and extend lifespan. So, Dr. Rhodes, welcome. I'm so excited to talk about this because honestly, I have been intermittent fasting since before it had a name. So
Amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Wendy. I'm super excited to be here.
yeah. Yeah. So how'd you get into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I got my BS in biochemistry from Loyola Marymount University down in LA, but like a lot of college kids, got out and then didn't really know what I wanted to do after that. So I took a immunology fellowship at Stanford, where I just kind of started pouring through all the research papers I could get my hands on, going to all the seminars I could go to, and eventually I came across healthy aging and longevity research, which I thought was so fascinating because it was something that used to be myth and legend, right? Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth, but is now this very active, very rigorous area of scientific study. And when you're in that space, eventually you come across fasting, because fasting is one of the only ways that we know of to reliably extend the lifespan in animal models. And then when you dive even deeper into that, it also helps to, treat, prevent, or delay most major diseases. So this really profound impact on health span. And what really fascinated me about that was it does all of that without adding anything into the body, right? So it's not this superfood or this wonder drug that is causing all of this to happen, but somehow fasting is activating, this dormant, what I like to call longevity bioprogram that we all already have inside of us, but just isn't ordinarily turned on. And when that clicked for me, it kind of made me mad because I was like, great. So my body knows how to live to be, 120 years old and in perfect health, but it's just not doing it. So that kind of like lit a fire in me of like, all right, I need to figure out what is happening in the human body during a fast. And is there a way that we can kind of like recreate that, but without actually having to do this very arduous task of lifelong fasting?
Right. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. So first of all, treat, prevent, or delay,
Mhm.
which is such a great way to think about disease, right? Like if you live long enough, you're probably going to get something. But if you're incorporating ways of being healthy that can treat, prevent, delay, or treat, it's kind of the order in which I would go for it, then you're already stacking the cards in your favor. And then when you think about fasting, you go, okay, it's not expensive. You don't need to buy anything and you don't need to have an advanced degree to do it. You're just doing it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that was something that really excited me about fasting too, was that it was something that, anyone could do as long as they can do it, safely from a biochemical health perspective.
How do you recommend? So some of our listeners, they've been fasting for years. And then some of our listeners say, I really can't go more than 3 hours or I get hypoglycemic. What's the message that you give for people who have a hard time going more than 8 hours overnight between fasts? So what do you recommend they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that I mean I have even more bad news than what we're already going to talk about. But if you can't go more than 8 hours, an overnight fast is what you would typically call that. Then it's really hard to you just got to like start where you can. If you really want to get into the lifestyle, you got to kind of be like, okay, cool. I can go 8 hours. Well, tomorrow I'm going to go 9 hours and just kind of, build up to that. Then 10 hours, then 11, then 12, just like keep going as much as you can, because that will help to actually reset your circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythms are very tied to our hunger responses. So just like your body knows, oh, it's, X o'clock at night, I'm supposed to be, winding down, getting ready for bed, starting to, start my sleep responses. It does the same thing with your hunger cues and your hunger responses. So if you're constantly eating at a certain time every day, your body starts to then anticipate that food coming in at that time and it'll make you hungry.
So muscle memory, your stomach has a muscle memory,
Yeah,
basically, is what you're
absolutely.
saying.
Yeah. And so the thing about this is that even when we talk about standard intermittent fasting, which is kind of like this 16-8 program, that is biochemically speaking actually not really sufficient to truly enter into a fasting state. So we have what's called glycogen stores in our body, which basically are stored carbohydrates within our cells and our muscles. And before around 20 to 24 hours, our body is going to utilize primarily those glycogen stores for the energy that we need. So we're going to still be in more of a carbohydrate burning state for those first 20 to 24 hours of fasting. And only after that, once we've depleted those stores, do we then really start to enter into this deeper state of fasting where you get this metabolic switch from the carbohydrates to the fat metabolism and the ketone bodies. So you get into ketosis, you start more of these cellular recycling processes like autophagy, these cellular regeneration processes that are more associated with all those beneficial, survival slash longevity mechanisms that happen with fasting. So by and large, this is the bad news that I was talking about before. A lot of us, are not getting as much fasting benefit as we actually think we are because, it really takes around that 20 to 24 hour mark to even get into the fasted state, let alone, achieve these deeper state benefits.
So okay, there's okay, more again, a lot to unpack, Chris. So
Yeah.
if you're someone who tends towards a ketogenic diet, do you get into that fat burning state faster, or does it not seem to matter whether you're kind of keto light or regular eating program or even Mediterranean? Like, is there some on the spectrum? Is there some point where this gets you there faster or not?
Yeah, if you're eating like purely keto, like not keto light, not dirty keto, truly keto, where you're not getting really any carbohydrates at all, that will definitely help you switch into, that ketogenic state a lot faster. It's all really going to depend, like you're talking about, on how much glycogen is in your body when you start fasting. If your stores are totally full, it's going to take longer than if they're half full or if they're a quarter full or whatever it is. And so that's going to really come down to something like, how much carbohydrates in your diet, what was their diet the yesterday, was it ketogenic, all that fun stuff. So that's really going to be the switch to the ketone bodies themselves. So you can get faster there by using a ketogenic diet. However, from some of the other molecular cellular things that are happening in fasting, that'll still come down to really, all right, how quickly can you work through the energy that you've taken into your body from your last meal and then kind of enter into the fasting state after that.
I mean, here's the challenge. You eventually need to eat.
Right.
So are you saying that this is, how often do you need to do this sort of longer fast?
Mhm. So when we look at the animal research for alternate day fasting, that's really where we see the best longevity effects and lifespan extension effects of fasting as a lifestyle, as an intervention. So that's going to look like, one day of normal eating followed by one day of fasting, which is just going to be, water or non-caloric beverages, something like that. Then another day of normal eating, another day of fasting, and then you just rinse and repeat for an organism's entire life. And when we do that, we can see around a 30 to 50% lifespan extension, even without altering the amount of calories that we're consuming. So those are kind of these really interesting, unique effects of fasting itself that make it a little bit different from the lifespan extension that you can get from caloric restriction and energy restriction. So that's really where we see the best lifespan extension is in that alternate day fasting regimen, which equates to around a 36-hour fast, like repeated over and over.
Do you do that yourself?
I did. I did for a while. So while I was at Stanford and getting into the whole fasting regimen, fasting lifestyle, I was really, really fascinated by it. So I just kind of started to put it to the test. So I started doing some fasting, taking my own blood, looking at my cells, seeing how their functionality changed around. And what I found there after doing a 60-hour fast where I was also, taking my blood every couple hours to see what was going on. I found that, that period between 36 to 48 hours of fasting was really where you get this plateau of functional benefits to cellular health. So I saw that at that 36-hour mark, my cells became more anti-inflammatory, they became more antioxidant, they were more cardioprotective, they had better, metabolic functionality, they had better protective ability. So it was really, really fascinating, especially as, a young kid out of college. I was probably 23 at the time, just to be able to say, oh, I'm already this young, healthy person. I can do this 1 day intervention and all of a sudden become like a super person. I thought that was so cool. So I got very, very hooked into that and did alternate day fasting as just my lifestyle for around 2 years while I was in that fellowship program. And that's really, really difficult because, there's this big element, not only of you're not eating for 36 hours, but also just the social isolation that can come along with that, right? You're not having meals with coworkers, you're not having dinner with friends and family, or if you are having dinner with friends, you have to be the weird guy who's just sitting across from them at the table, like, I'm just going to hold my glass of water and watch you while you eat. And like, nobody wants that, right?
Right. I was just thinking if I were to do that, I would literally have to enroll my entire world. And we would have to say we eat on odd days, we fast on even days or whatever, reverse it if we want, but that we would all have to do it together so that we could plan eating and so feast and famine, we could plan it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially.
A
It
lot of
seems like
work.
it would be challenging. Like I've done a 5-day fast before, and the most fascinating thing I learned was that I never got hungrier than feeling really hungry. Like I got really hungry, but then it wasn't like it got worse. It just, that's how hungry I got. And then it passed and then it came back. So that was very freeing to me. I thought I would always just keep getting hungrier. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I
hungrier
totally
and
do.
hungrier.
Yeah, and that was my experience as well. It's kind of that, circadian reset that we were talking about, where, your body does have these like hunger comes in waves, right? It's going to be like, oh, hey, like we're supposed to be eating now. I'm going to make you hungry as an anticipatory thing, or like, to let you know that we should be finding food. But if you just, let that pass for it's usually around like a half an hour, right? Then you're fine again. And
Yeah, it
that's
was
really how you
fascinating.
reset it.
So so it seems like it would be difficult for most people to do the every other day eat, don't eat.
Definitely.
So what's the next level of, hey, this will make a difference. It's here's optimal, and then here's this is going to be really helpful, and then here's the minimum viable product. Is that, do you have it stratified like that? Do you have it
Yeah.
stratified the way I think?
Yeah, actually, like we kind of do. So I would say, alternate day fasting, that's where we have the best data to show this lifespan extension, longevity effects. The next below that would probably be like a 1 meal a day schedule. So that would be more or less like a 24-hour fast every day, right? And you're really condensing your eating window. So you're minimizing these negative effects of the postprandial response or like the post-eating response. We've got a lot of, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Question, does it matter what you eat in that time? Because that's almost intrinsically a calorie restricted
Right.
approach, unless you're eating cheesecake for your meal and eating a whole cheesecake. So, so does I'm hoping that the quality of the calories matters, but does it matter, or is it simply the restriction that matters?
It's a little bit of both. So definitely, anytime you're putting food in your body, the quality of that food, the nutrients that are coming in, the micronutrients and the macronutrients, the polyphenols, like the flavonols, the bioactives that are going to come in from whatever your food source is, all of that's going to impact your biochemistry in some way or another. There's really, no two ways about that. So that's always going to be an important factor for any element of nutrition. But the restriction itself, the time condensed eating, does also have this impact on how your biochemistry operates, right? So your body is going to end up putting a lot of energy into that very narrow eating window of like, okay, digest, metabolize, absorb, whatever. Like, you can't fit it all in at once. So there is going to be a restriction element that just naturally happens unless you're, like you said, really planning it out to be like, I know what my macros are supposed to be, and I'm going to hit that mark, whatever it is, and I'm going to make meals that, align within that. If you're just doing it naturally and like not putting all as much of that effort into it, then you're definitely going to restrict some calories just by way of my stomach can't hold it all. And then, the actual postprandial response, the post eating response lasts for about, 4 to 6 hours after you finish a meal. And then after that point, you'll be in more or less this, restorative homeostasis maintenance state of the body. And then that's where you kind of see more of these fasting like benefits that start to show up. So that's really where you're gonna where this is gonna be a really different than a normal, 3 meals a day plus snacks, where we're kind of always in that postprandial fed state because we're never allowing our body enough time to resolve it. And that's where you can get into problems with kind of like, chronic inflammation and, chronic, lipid and glucose swings.
Okay. What do you tell people who work out a lot? Because if you're a distance runner or if you're a weightlifter, it seems like these two philosophies don't really go together. Although I see the value, I remember, go to this trainer on weekends whom I call Evil Chris, not related to Chris Rhodes. So my Evil Chris trainer, I went and worked out with him. God, this is already 2 years ago, and I didn't eat before I went because I was fasting. I'm not going to break my fast. And I'm in the workout, and I'm like, I think I'm going to puke. I have nothing in my stomach. I'm like, I'm going to puke. And he goes, did you eat? I said, no, I didn't eat. I fast. And he goes, well, you can't go and do a hard workout unless you eat. And I was like, well, that kind of makes sense to me. But I wasn't in ketosis, and I wasn't, it was like neither here nor there. So I'm curious what you do for people who really want to work out well, but also recognize they want to fast. Where does the happy medium or the line happen there?
Yeah, so I would say that it's really different strokes for different folks. It's going to be something different for everybody. For me, for example, I do the 1 meal a day schedule. That's kind of like my lifestyle right now. And I like to
Wait,
basically,
which meal? I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but I'm like
yeah,
really
no,
curious about which meal do you do?
yeah, I do dinner. So that's kind of my day. I wake up, I get some green tea, I take my Mimeo, my fasting mimetic, right, to give me these longer term fasting benefits in a shorter fasting window. That'll have some appetite suppression effects that like carry me throughout the day, and then I'll usually work out in a fasted state once I'm done with work, and then go immediately into my like big meal of the day. And I like that because that kind of gives me the best of both worlds. Like, yes, I have to work out in a fasted state, but my body's kind of adapted to that at this point. And then going right into a big meal after that, then you're really promoting, like, all right, we're getting a bunch of protein in there. We're setting off these like pro growth pathways like mTOR and IGF-1 and all that fun stuff that's really conducive to muscle growth. But then we're not over indexing on it because we're going to be fasting for the rest of the time. So it's basically like really dialing in your nutritional timing to make sure that you're still supporting your muscles' recovery and growth abilities.
What are you doing for your workouts typically?
So that for me is going to almost exclusively be strength training. So I'll go in and do like resistance bands and squats and deadlifts and like the basic stuff really with free weights, switch it up, do cables, pull ups, anything like that. But it's going to be a majority just strength training because that's when I look at the literature, really what ends up kind of mattering most in terms of longevity. Because number one, when you focus on strength training, you're building up both muscle mass and bone density. Those are two of the best biomarkers of aging, especially after age 65, where you really see this bifurcation. And people who can enter into 65 with really good muscle mass and really good bone density have much better prospects for longevity because there's less falls, there's less frailty that can happen. And then number two, when you build up muscle, you're also building up your metabolic rate. So that helps to kind of prevent these other negative effects of caloric restriction that can happen of like decreased metabolism over time because your cells start becoming much more metabolically efficient.
How long have you been doing the 1 meal a day?
So the 1 meal a day I have been doing since I started graduate school, which would have been in 2015. So about 10 years
Okay.
at this point.
Okay. And what if you don't mind my asking, if you do, just tell me to pound sand. What has been the impact on your friends and family life?
Hmm.
If when you're eating once a day, what has that been like for the people around you and for you to sit out or to be sort of separated?
Yeah, so I would say that this was a big problem that I had more with the alternate day fasting than I did with the one meal a day. And ironically, the reason why I got into the one meal a day in the first place was because I got into a relationship, and my partner was basically like, "Yeah, no, you're not gonna like sit out, sit out the meal. You're at least gonna have one with me every day." And I'm like, "Okay, fine, I can do that." So like, that was how I really transitioned from alternate day fasting to one meal a day. I also had this advice from my sister as well, because when I was doing the alternate day fasting, I was very regimented about it. And we were on vacation one time and I was still doing it. And she was like, Chris, you're gonna live longer, sure, but what's the point of living longer if you have to live less? And so that was really a big turning point for me as well, where it's like, yeah, we may have taken this a bit too far. So that's really why I got into the one meal a day. And the one meal a day um, actually works pretty well just with like the normal social situations that we find ourselves in. Most of the time I'm going to be, working all day. And if I'm going to go out with people, it's going to be, after working hours. So I can still, go and have that whatever, dinner with friends is at the end of the day. So it hasn't impacted it all that much, which is nice.
When you are in control of your food rather than eating out, what does that one meal look like?
Hmm. So when I'm in control of my food, I really like to stick more to kind of like a quote unquote paleo style diet, and not necessarily because I believe in the like philosophy of paleo where it's like we, evolved to eat these things, but from a nutritional perspective, it is like a pretty good diet because it really focuses on high quality lean proteins and high quality, fruits, vegetables, seeds, and nuts. So that's kind of how it's kind of how I'll end up eating. And I do a lot of these recipes that I call quote unquote nutrition magic. Then I talk about this on my TikTok channel, but basically trying to maximize the amount of volume that you can get from food, maximize the amount of nutrients that you can get from food, but minimize the actual calories. So like doing a lot of these one-to-one swaps with some cool new ingredients, or, for example, doing something like instead of regular rice, cauliflower rice, right?
Mhm. Okay. Meaning you could basically eat your weight in cauliflower and get 30 calories, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So yeah,
okay.
for most people, this would not be the way that they would like to eat, especially on a one meal a day schedule, right? Because it would be like you're really trying to cram a ton of mass into this very small eating window. But that, for whatever reason, just like really works for me. I really like the feeling of like, oh, I'm very full. And so like, I think that that's part of the fasting, to be honest. My biochemistry, my evolutionary brain is just kind of like, yes, we are very full and satisfied. So, we can relax now.
I want to go back to, we were talking about ideal, good, and minimum viable product. And I interrupted you and sent us off through this whole thing when you were talking about the one meal a day. So was there something beneath that that would be the next level?
Yeah, so I would say the typical minimum viable product for fasting is gonna be more of that 16-8 style. But this is where you see a lot of controversy in the field about whether or not, fasting has distinct effects, whether or not fasting is different than caloric restriction or not. Because from a biochemical perspective, since it's less than that 20-24 hour mark where you deplete your glycogen stores, there's not too much of a biochemical metabolic difference of what's happening in your body versus just a more traditional eating state. So what you're going to see with the 16-8 is that you're going to get good stabilization of some metabolic markers like glucose levels, insulin levels, triglyceride levels, cholesterol levels. But outside of that, that kind of, metabolic regulation at a systemic level, you're not going to get a ton of very distinct cellular effects that happen. So one thing that the fasting space is kind of notorious for is because there are so many different types of fasting and because there are so many different studies that have looked at different, levels of fasting, different time frames of fasting, different patterns of fasting over different time courses, there's a lot of information that apply to deeper states of fasting that actually don't apply to the earlier states of fasting, but we have it in our brain that they're actually, all the same thing. So it's like if I do a 16-hour fast, then I'm gonna get, an immune cell stem cell reset, right? I'm gonna get this like really deep state of autophagy, are going to get into ketosis. And that's actually not going to happen with these shorter fasts. That's going to be really the long-term ones, like, 36, 48, 72 hours, things like that. So,
Okay. And is there any benefit to doing a fast once a week for 24 hours, or is it like everything's better than nothing?
right. Yeah. I would say actually that like a once a week 24-hour fast is probably ultimately better for you from just like a cellular reset perspective than daily 16/8 fasting. Just because you'll never experience the cellular effects of the 24-hour mark in a shorter fasting window. And that applies for any stage of fasting, right? You're never going to be able to get the biochemical effects that happen from a 36-hour or 48-hour or 72-hour, even if you kind of like, stack all the other hours together, if that makes sense. So yeah, going as far as you can at one time in a fast is going to be the most impactful and change your metabolic functioning and your biochemistry around the most, rather than just doing, a lot of shorter term fasts.
So let's talk about fasting mimetics because you referred to green tea and you referred to Mimeo. Does bone broth fall into a fasting mimetic? Like where's the line? What are you talking about when you're talking about fasting mimetics? And then what
Right.
falls in the category?
Right. So a fasting mimetic is just something that can recreate the either cellular, metabolic, biochemical effects of fasting. And that is usually something that, is like a drug class of molecules, right? So something like rapamycin, for example, is going to be inhibiting mTOR, which is something that also happens during fasting. And then that has specific effects on health and longevity. Or metformin, for example, which is an AMP kinase activator, which is also highly elevated during a fast. So that's kind of, the chemical class of what we would call a fasting or a caloric restriction mimetic. I mentioned Mimeo before. Mimeo is the fasting mimetic that I developed from the research that I was doing in graduate school. So basically, what we did for that was we had people come in, fast for 36 hours, and then looked at their before and after. And what we saw was that when people fast for 36 hours, there's this unique set of molecules that are produced by the body that are really only elevated during a fast. And we found that those were the ones responsible for activating a lot of these cellular health and longevity benefits of fasting. So we basically just took those molecules, put them into a daily pill so that you can recreate fasting at the molecular level, get those same benefits of a 36-hour fast, but without actually having to go that deep into fasting. And so that's usually what I'll end up recommending to people who are doing the 16/8, where it's like, okay, great. Like you're doing this, it fits into your lifestyle. Let me give you some of these deeper state benefits that you wouldn't ordinarily experience in your shorter term fast, and also help to make the fasting easier because the molecules that we identified have some interesting impacts on both mood, cognition, and then appetite suppression as well.
What are these substances?
So these are natural metabolites that are produced by the body during a 36-hour fast. So that's nicotinamide, spermidine, palmitoyl ethanolamide, and oleoyl ethanolamide.
Seriously, that is quite a mouthful.
It is, yeah, it is quite the mouthful. Yeah, when you get into the deeper, biochemical terms, everything becomes very long and confusing.
Okay, so if I mean, NAD is so unstable in pill form. How are OEA and PEA also unstable, or are they Stable, like how does this work?
Right. So we're actually not using NAD itself. We're using nicotinamide, which is an NAD precursor. So that is actually very, very stable in pill form. When you take it, your body takes it up, turns it into first nicotinamide riboside, then into nicotinamide mononucleotide, and then into NAD. So nicotinamide in and of itself is kind of like a broad spectrum NAD precursor that's going to be giving you all of these benefits of both nicotinamide riboside, NMN, and NAD. Palmitoyl ethanolamide and oleoyl ethanolamide are also very stable because they're lipid amides, so they're not prone to peroxidation like normal lipids are. They just have a different chemical structure, which makes them very shelf stable. And the cool thing about our formulation is that we've done 3 clinical studies with it so far, showing that we can, number one, all of the molecules are bioavailable, that you take them up, they come into circulation after around an hour and stay elevated for 4 to 6 hours after that. They can also recreate these cellular fasting benefits even during a meal. So those same anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, cardioprotective, metabolic enhancement effects. We've also shown that with 8 weeks of supplementation with this formulation, we can get a 2.5 year reduction in biological age. And we've also shown that in 8 weeks of supplementation, we can have these really powerful impacts on appetite suppression, hunger control, improved satiety, as well as metabolic marker optimization. So, really improving fasting glucose levels, cholesterol levels, as well as reducing cellular stress levels. So, everything that fasting should be doing for you, but just, a lot simpler.
So is it something that you would take at the beginning of your fast or the end of your meal, or would you take it at the end of your fast? So if you're doing a 24, when are you taking it? If you're doing a 16/8, when do you take it?
Right. So it's really all dependent on whatever feels best for you. I typically say that the best time to take it is when you're kind of like feeling the hunger the most, right? Like when that hunger pang comes in, that's kind of the right time to take Mimeo to help carry you through. Or if you're doing something or what we were talking about before, right? Where it's like, I really want to increase the amount of time that I can fast. So let me go as long as I can without any help, and then, take the Mimeo and see how far I can go again after that. But
Well, wait, I'm sorry. Does it take about an hour to kick in so that you feel it?
yeah, that's correct. About an
So,
hour.
so if you say, okay, normally I can get to 9 a.m. and then I absolutely lose my mind, then it would be, okay, take it at 8 o'clock so that you can it'll already kick in by 9 o'clock when you're already typically going to lose your mind. So plan ahead. Is that how
Right.
you would do it? Okay.
Yeah, that's how I would do it. But the nice thing about Mimeo is that in all the 3 clinical studies that we've done, nobody was actually fasting during those studies. So everybody was just having a normal diet and lifestyle. No changes need to happen. So that's why we call it a fasting mimetic instead of, like a fasting enhancer. Although it can be a fasting enhancer, and that's how I use it. So I'll take it, like I said, in the morning with my green tea and just kind of use it as a way to help carry me through the day.
Does it have caffeine in it?
No, it does not. Mm-mm.
Okay. So you get the caffeine from the green tea, but it doesn't have, it's not like the medicines that, I mean,
Right.
and
Yeah,
what
it's not
about,
like 5 hour energy where it's like, it's caffeine.
mhm. And what about people who are getting hypoglycemic and that's why they have to stop fasting earlier than a 16-hour? Can this help level them out?
It would definitely, like for a hypoglycemic, that might be a little bit trickier because these molecules we've identified can help to, lower glucose levels and help control them and maintain them in that homeostatic range. But we don't know if it would, help to upswing a hypoglycemic response.
Okay. Okay. Any downsides to doing this?
So the only downside to doing it is some people do have a genetic sensitivity to niacin metabolism. So nicotinamide is a niacin derivative. So if you are sensitive to that, there can be some GI upset that happens. Typically, that can just be resolved by taking the formulation with food, and especially yogurt, because that has both protein and lipid matrices that can help bind the nicotinamide and smooth out its digestion. But That's about, I would say, 5% of people actually have that sensitivity. And otherwise, for anyone else, especially, if you're already comfortable taking supplements on an empty stomach, not really much downside because all of these molecules are naturally produced by the body anyway. So our body inherently knows how to, absorb them, utilize them, metabolize them. So it's very safe product, very minimal side effects.
Is it once a day? How many pills and how many times a day?
Yeah, just 2 capsules once per day.
Okay. We'll put this in the show notes, but where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so if they want to find out more about me specifically, they can watch me scream about nutrition into my bathroom mirror on TikTok. I'm at that nutrition dr, that nutrition doctor. If they want to find out more about Mimeo, they can go to mimiohealth.com. That's MIMIO health.com.
Okay, beautiful. All right, Chris, thanks for being on the show. This is really cool. And thanks for letting me really hammer you with
Oh, no,
questions.
I love it. I'll talk about fasting till the cows come home.
Yeah, it was great. So for the listeners, I hope this made a difference for you. And go look Dr. Chris Rhodes up and follow him and buy the Mimeo and do what you need to do to get healthy so you can feel freaking amazing. And Chris, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Feel Freaking Amazing podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. My pleasure.